something about Joe. I'm just going to kind of go off the cuff a little bit. Joe's become one of my best friends in this business. He really and truly knows what he's doing. We kind of have even though we've done different things, we have similar stories. We've been kind of in real estate for about the same amount of time, 4 or 5 years. 5 years, right? I spent the first year kind of trying to figure things out a little bit. Joe spent his first year studying the market, trying to figure things out. And he has been able to do a lot of stuff. I kind of went a little bit different route. He's been able to acquire many rentals, I'll just say many, and do many fix and flips, all by using the power of recycling the same money over and over and over and over. I think it's like $50,000 or $60,000 over and over. Just did it all with $50,000. In the beginning of this. So I want to introduce to you, please stand up on your feet, everybody, and give a warm welcome to Birmingham's own Joe Turney.
I never know if the microphone's working. Is it working? Working. In the back. Is it working? That was a test, and everybody back there failed, so it's not working in the back. Anybody back there hear me? Can y'all hear me? Okay, good. Because I can't tell if it's working or not. Make sure this is working. Okay, guys, like you said, my name is Joe Turney, and I'm primarily working right now on the east side of Birmingham, pretty much from the city of Leeds, out where Bass Pro Shop is, all the way to Anniston, Oxford, like east of side of the state, kind of, is where I'm working at. And like I said, I haven't been doing this very long compared to some people, but the real estate industry, the real estate market, the real estate world basically reinvents itself every 4 or 5 years. So I feel like I've been doing it for one real estate generation. It's like not much changes, but again, everything changes every few years, gradually moving and shifting. You got to follow things around. So before we get started, I want to show you something. It just so happened to work out today. We're going to be talking about getting loans from banks and working with your local lenders. On the way down here tonight, 2 hours ago, I got 2 loans from Covenant Bank. There's the paperwork for them. I stopped and signed the papers on them on the way down here. So a $100,000 loan there and a $66,000 loan there. And so it works. It worked 2 hours ago and it's still working. So it's pretty amazing to me. Those loans, the closing costs, every fee added together, closing costs and everything cost me about $800. So it's cheap money if you do it right. You got to play their game though. You can't play your game and ask them to follow you. You have to follow their rules. So here's basically the big plan. To make this work, you got to have a house to start with that doesn't have a mortgage on it. You can get that through hard money lenders, borrow money from an IRA account. You just need a house without a mortgage. And you need to spend it. I'm going to get into the percentage of it, but you need a pretty good deal on it. You need to be somewhere around 70 to 80% of your rehab cost. You're going to renovate it, you're going to rent it out, and then you're going to refinance it just like I did today with a local lender and get your money back out and go do it again. So to me, it's awesome. I was talking to somebody earlier today. It took me about 1.5 years to figure this out on my own. And about a year into this whole process, I realized I stumbled upon a group like this, and they were teaching this kind of stuff. And I stumbled upon a website called Bigger Pockets, and they were teaching this. And I was like, oh my God, I could have known this a year ago. I figured it out eventually, but it was right there in front of me the whole time. I never even bothered to read it or look at it or think about it. So anyway, before we get into this is all financing and bank stuff. How many people were here last month for Claude Diamond? Anybody remember? Wasn't he kind of energetic, charismatic, dynamic? It was fun and engaging. This isn't going to be anything like that. This is going to be more like that adrenaline rush you get the first time you use a new toothbrush. Yeah, it can be exciting, but it doesn't last very long. So I say all that to say, it's not the most sexy topic in the world, but it's very functional and it works. It works 100% of the time if you follow the rules. You got to know the rules and you got to follow them. Are you waiting for me? Okay. You like you were saying something. Okay. Okay, here's what you're gonna need to get started. I haven't spell checked any of this, so if any of these words don't make sense, just ignore them. You're gonna need some basically you're gonna need some good credit or decent credit to start with to make this whole plan work. And it doesn't have to be perfect, it just needs to be above the minimum thresholds for your lender. Most lenders that I know have like a 650 credit score minimum to do this kind of commercial lending. So it's not super great, but it just needs to be middle of the road somewhere. You need to have some kind of documented income, and that means documented to the bank. You can make a lot of money, and if you're like some people, you make millions of dollars in your tax return, you're eligible for food stamps on your tax return. So, it has to be documented. The banks will not loan you money if you don't have documentation to prove that you make it. So here's what I had to do, and it was a sacrifice. I had to pay more taxes for 2 years, so I had 2 years worth of tax returns showing good income, and now I have almost unlimited credit. And I've got all my lines, I went and got all my lines of credit as quick as I could, and now next year I won't make any money on my tax return. So you either have to pay your taxes or not get any credit. You gotta have some kind of documentation on it. And then you gotta have some kind of money to start. Again, it can be IRA, hard money lending, a bank loan. You gotta have something that doesn't put a mortgage on your house. Get it from a friend, it doesn't matter. Win it off the pull lever machine, you know, whatever how you get it, you need some kind of money to get started. And then you're gonna need to develop a relationship. A relationship's the key word, with a local lender. Somebody who knows you. When you see them on the street or at Walmart, they know you. These are people that you're gonna know and develop a long-term relationship with. Like the lady that helped me with these 2 loans today, her name's Verna. She's out in Leeds at Covenant Bank. Highly recommend her. She almost asked me not to mention her because she said, I am so covered up, don't give me any more business. So tell her I sent you when y'all go down there. So step 1, find a local lender. And the reason I say step 1 is to find your lender first is because you need to know your local lender is going to set the rules. Your local lender is going to set the rules for you. You need to know what their rules are. Every lender has different rules. You need to know what those are. So here's how I find them. I've got 3 in my area that I work with. I don't need to go anywhere else because it's enough. These 3 give me everything I ever need. The way I find them is I go to their website and I look under the location list. And generally what I found is if they have more than about 5 or 10 locations, they're probably too big for this kind of program. And the reason I say they're too big is the bigger the banks and the bigger the operation, the more bureaucracy and overhead there is. The less likelihood that the person you're talking to can actually make a real decision. Verna can make a decision and write a check for me in 2 weeks without anybody else's approval. You want that kind of person, and generally you don't get that. The bigger it is, there's more supervision, there's more rules, there's more regulations, and they're not free to operate. So fewer locations, the better. And you want a bank that you can meet directly with a loan officer. You don't want to call a toll-free number. You don't want to be sending paperwork to, I'll meet with you, but then when you get home, send your paperwork somewhere else, fax it into our corporate office. If they use the terms that they want you to send your paperwork to their corporate office, you still don't have the right person. You want to be able to hand your paperwork to the person, sit there with them and look at it and talk about it. See, a lot of these banks don't really care much about your credit score even. Like Metro Bank and Moody, they want to know, yeah, my credit score varies a lot depending on my lines of credit. When I have my lines of credit maxed out, my score drops. But when I pay them off, it comes back up. So every month it's different. They don't really care about the number. They want to know, yeah, your score's low right now, but why? They actually look at the report and say, oh, you have no delinquencies, no back payment, so you're good. That's something the big banks won't do. They don't care. If your number's too low, they won't work with you. But the local banks can make exceptions to that. And here's a key thing, though. I know I'm going kind of fast, but I do have a lot to talk about. So take a lot of notes, go back and watch the recording. If I go too fast, I just got to get through it. So This is a key point. You are there at the bank interviewing them. They want good business. They want good loans on their books. And if you do your numbers right, you're going to be a good loan to them. And you're going to actually have banks competing with each other if you start interviewing them, like, tell me what you can do for me attitude, instead of, will you please give me money? A whole different concept. Like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this business. I would like a financial partner. I'm looking for one. But if you don't want to do it, I'm still going to go find somewhere. That kind of stance that you have. Not arrogant, but at the same time, not desperate or needy in any means. You're interviewing them to see if they're fit for what you want to do with your business. And again, use the terms that you're looking for a long-term financial partner, because you're going to be building your business with their money. You're going to take their money and do business with it in the town where they live, where they're at. So you're looking for a long-term partner. Even sometimes we allow, put a sign out in front of our house flips, financed by Metro Bank, and it's just a payback to them for giving us the money to do it. So when you're sitting down with your loan officer, you're going to call, make an appointment, and say, I'd like to speak with a commercial loan officer. These are commercial loans that you're looking for. You're going to call and ask for an appointment with a commercial loan officer. Yeah, there's some are better than others. You don't know if you're getting a good one or not. You just have to go talk to who's the first person you get a chance to. You'll find out later if you got a good one or not. You just don't know. You just have to go start the process somewhere. Go talk to a loan officer. So you're going to ask for one, and again, this is all in person, not by phone. Do not do this application by phone. Go and meet in person. It's very important to have this relationship set up. But here's a question you can answer by phone before you even go. Because if they say no to this question, you can't do business with them. Do you offer in-house portfolio loans? That's what you're looking for. Keyword, portfolio loans. Portfolio loans means that Covenant Bank are going to take these loans and they're going to put them in a filing cabinet and they're going to list them as an asset on their books in their own investment portfolio. This isn't going to leave the bank. It's going to be with them until I pay it off. So portfolio loans means the money comes from your local bank, your loan stays with that local bank, and here's a very key part. They don't have to go through Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac underwriting. Which, if you've ever lived through that experience, is not pleasant at all. It's like a financial enema or something. It's just like, it's so painful. I'm a realtor and I help people through it all the time, and I just tell them right up front, I said, the next 4 weeks are going to be the worst 4 weeks of your life. They're going to ask you for things that make no sense whatsoever. You're going to give them the same copy of the same document at least 6 times. So go ahead and make 6 copies of everything, because it's not going to be pleasant. So these people don't have to do all that. It's just a whole different world in lending. And if you've ever tried to do mortgages, this process is going to be enlightening for you, because it's nothing like a traditional mortgage. Here's the key number you have to know. This is something you do in person. This number you need to know before you can start shopping for your houses. What is your maximum loan to value rate? I love the word, loan to value ratio. And this is expressed as a percentage. So loan to value. What this means is, if your value of your house is $100,000, there is a maximum the bank will loan you based on that value. And it ranges generally from 70, 75, or 80%, roughly. Every bank's got different rules. But it makes a big difference to you if you're working with a bank who only does 70% and you're assuming they're going to do 80%, this whole thing ain't going to work. So find out what your bank's legal or their in-house limit is. It's a percentage. That percentage is going to be your budget for the whole rehab process. So for, I believe Covenant is at 70% on, it all depends on the price range. They gave me a little scale, like they're up to 80% on some smaller stuff and 70% on bigger stuff. So it kind of changes. Find out this percentage so that you can go and start this whole process. This one is getting harder and harder to find. What are your appraisal requirements? Again, we're doing this in person. Tell me about your appraisal process. I just found out this week, as Verna's handing me these 2 papers, she said, Joe, I'm sorry to tell you, we gotta start doing appraisals now. It's like, oh. For the last 2 years, they've never done an appraisal on any of my properties. They've looked at the value, they looked at tax records. I brought in a list of comps and they signed off on it and we had a loan. So if you can find a bank that does what's called, here's what the holy grail you're looking for, is an in-house appraisal. An in-house appraisal means your loan officer is gonna look at your property and decide if it's worth it or not. Man, that is so much easier than trying to get an appraiser to agree with you on your value. Because, you know, your front door's only got one hinge on it, the windows are all busted out, you know, it's got dog poop this thick in the whole house, and you say it's worth $100,000. The appraiser's not gonna agree with you most of the time. So, but an in-house appraisal, we can look at, well, what will it be when you fix it up? Then that's the value we can agree on, and it's awesome. So, as of today, that's not available at Covenant anymore, but it has been for years now. So, who was I was talking to? Or someone just got a loan with him, yeah, right there. Just did it this week, and he got charged an appraisal fee. It's like, he missed it by that much. You know? So. Here's another one, credit and income requirements. These are the numbers like we talked about earlier. Basically, it's two things. The credit score, which is like a credit report score, and how much of your income they allow you to spend on debt. It's a percentage. Sometimes it's 30–40% of your income can be used towards these debts. Now we're talking about just getting started. When you first start out, your first house, you're primarily working on your personal income. That's all the income you got documented. So that's the income that's got to qualify you for these loans until you have rental income coming in. Something else a local bank can do that the big guys can't is you can take them a copy of your lease that you just rented your house and say, will you include this income with my job income? And a lot of them will say yes to that. Even though you don't have to have it on your tax return, so you just have to have a current lease, which is something that Fannie Mae will not consider. Fannie Mae will require you to have 2 years on your tax return before they count the income. So it's a big difference. See the difference. So again, we're talking to a local bank, local lender. In my area, there's Covenant Bank, Metro Bank, and Union State Bank. Those are the three big ones in my area. For those three, they cover probably 90% of all commercial financing in our county. Relationship is the key. Pick out a person that you like. If you, in your interview with this person, you guys don't click, they don't understand what you're trying to do, maybe it's their first day on the job and they're scared to death about making the boss angry, find another loan officer that you connect with and you have a relationship with, and stay with that person. Do not talk to anyone else at the bank. Talk to only your guy, your lady, or your guy, and so they know you and they know what you're going to ask. Because you know, when I call Verna, I say, you know, one day you're going to be tired of me calling. But hopefully it's not today, but one day you're going to be tired of me calling. And I got another question for you. Always work with the same person. The banks are going to have rules. They're going to have requirements. They all might seem random to you. They may seem to not make any sense. But the most amateur mistake you can ever make is asking a bank to make an exception to one of their rules. Their rules, I don't know much about banking, but I know their rules are written somewhere in their company. And if they violate those rules, it's a major, major problem for the bank, because they get audited. Are you following your own rules kind of audit? So don't ask them to make an exception. If their rule is 80%, then that's the rule. Don't call and say, listen, can you do 90% on my loan, because now you've lost credibility with those folks. Instead of asking that bank to do 90%, go find another bank that will do it. Find a bank with different rules. Here's a key point I want to point out. And this process, you're going to be doing a lot of loans, a lot of applications, a lot of financial. You're going to get pretty good at it over time. But the banks don't like risk. They want pretty safe $250,000 they can loan one person without anybody else's signature. They can just do it. I recommend using that process until you reach that limit, and eventually they're going to tell you, this happened to me like a dozen times now. They're going to say, Joe, we like you, we love you, you're a great guy and all that, but you know, we can't go any higher. You're at our personal limit until you have some history with us. You need to, as far as we can go. So I just leave theirs and I go next door, knock on the next bank, and I start the whole process over again. So stay with the same lender until you reach that limit, because it's a relationship. Because eventually they're gonna, after a year or two, they're gonna come back and say, listen, you've been with us a year or two now, we're gonna raise your limit up and we can go again, another round. Another key phrase, this is worth coming tonight. When you're talking to a bank, use the term refinance. I have a rental house that I would like to refinance. Please do not use the term cash out. It scares banks to death. They're like, cash out. They're thinking Mexico, he's leaving the country, his wife is, there's something going on, they're splitting up, he's cashing out. Use the term refinance. It's a little different, but it'll make a huge difference in your results. If you call and say, I'd like to cash out some equity in one of my houses, they're gonna, I wouldn't do it. I don't know, you're cashing out, it means you're leaving town. So, you should always know what your current credit score is. I subscribe to credit monitoring services. You should just know that, so that when you're on the phone with somebody, or when you're in the person sitting in the chair with people, and they ask you, what is your current credit score? You should say, right now, as of today, here's my number. And what I normally say is, I just happen to have my credit report with me today. So go back to the same loan officer. I keep saying this over and over again, but it really is the key. The relationship here is the key to the whole thing. Okay, we're going after, for this business model, we're going after monthly cash flow. We want to build retirement. We want to build an empire that pays you whether you get out of bed or not. Which, if you guys know me, is my whole harping theme song is lifestyle, 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 lifestyle. Do not let your business interfere with your life. You can't have a lifestyle without good cash flow. You can't have good cash flow if you finance too much money. So you want to take the minimum, not maximum. Most people are going to tell you to max out these loans. If you have $70,000 invested in a house that's worth $150,000, the banks are going to offer you a $100,000 loan on it. It's so tempting. You're going to say you're not doing it, but I'm telling you, it's so tempting to say no to that when there's a $25,000 check on the table, and you're like, no, I just want what I have in it. I just want my minimum, so that my monthly cash flow works. You guys realize when you borrow more money, your payments are higher, which means there's a less margin for you monthly. So just do the minimum. Like for me, what I do is I do a lot of house flips. I do a lot of those. I do 1 or 2 a month sometimes. I take that money from those flips and I use it to leave it in the rental houses. Like if I have $80,000 invested in a rental house, I just made 20 off of a house flip, I will only borrow 60. Just enough to keep me at zero. I just want the same balance in the checkbook all the time. When you're talking to banks, you will look better if you're over-prepared. If there's a thought in your mind that they may ask you for something, or they may ask you about something, or if you have a previous bankruptcy and it might come up, get all your documentation and take it with you. Don't let them come to you. You go to them and say, this is going to be an issue. I'm just going to tell you right up front that I was in prison for 18 years. I just got out yesterday. So, I'm just telling you up front. So it's a new day today, right? Do not expect any trust. Now, you can be friends. You can have lunch with these folks. You can shake hands with them. You can even be at the bathroom talking to them in the next stall. But do not expect them to trust what you say. You've got to have documentation on all these things. If you say this house rents for $900 a month, you should have a lease in your package that shows $900 a month lease current. Don't expect anything to be taken at face value, because eventually your loan officer's boss is going to ask him about this loan, and he or she has to have all the right answers, or else he doesn't want to work with you anymore. Like, y'all have a great thing, he gives you the loan, you leave the bank, the next day his boss comes down and says, tell me about these things, and he didn't have those answers. Now he's embarrassed, his job's at risk, and it's your fault. He don't want to do business with you anymore, and you don't know why. They just don't talk to you. You don't know why. I can tell you one story. My favorite loan officer, the first one I ever started working with, he was by far the easiest loan in the entire industry that anyone's ever heard of. Like, You call him on Wednesday and he'll call you the next day, Thursday evening or Friday, I got a check ready for you, come down here and get it. Well, no kidding. I'm at the post office in Odenville, I look over in St. Clair Times, and he's on the front page, and he's in prison. I was like, man, I know this sounds horrible, y'all gonna think I'm a horrible person. My first thought is, I need to call the bank. Who's got his job? He can't give me any more loans. He had a bad accident. There was a lot of stuff. I don't want to get into his story, but all of a sudden my business was gone because he's not there anymore, and the new guy is a fuddy-duddy. He works at 1/3 speed. He'll eventually do it, but it's just not the same. It's not the same. Now that's when I started looking for other loan officers. Every loan officer is going to have their own personality. Some are comfortable going fast. Some are going to tell you we can do this really, really fast, and for them they're thinking, 8, 9 weeks. That'd be really fast. And the other guy's thinking 3 or 4 days. So everybody's different. So you should know your person. And when I refer people to other lenders, I say this guy's going to take 8 weeks, but he's going to do it for you. If you're willing to wait it out, he's a good guy to work with. But these guys are going to be 1% interest higher, but they're going to do it in a week. So tell me which one you want. And I know that because I've met with all these people and I work with them. When you do your interview with people, when you're talking to your loan officer at the end of the process, when you're getting kind of wrapping up your interview, you say, listen, I'll be coming back to you. Let them know I'm coming back to you when I get my first property ready to finance. What do you need from me at that time? And take notes. Write this stuff down from the loan officer. They're going to tell you what they need. And when you come back to them, you should have everything they told you about in that meeting with you at that time. So this is all about presentation. I'm talking about. Have you guys ever seen? I can't harp on this for a little bit. There's one of my favorite movies is a kids movie called Megamind. Have you ever heard of Megamind? If you haven't, you should go watch it. There's a villain in there. There's 2 villains fighting, and one guy's like, "Oh yeah, you're a villain, but you'll never be a super villain." And he was like, "Well, what's the difference?" He's like, "Presentation, baby." So I'm telling you, you can be an investor or you can be a professional investor. The difference probably is just presentation, making yourself look attractive to the right people. Now, you should always look attractive to your spouse, but I'm just talking about the right people who can actually get you going. All right, so here we are, the big day. You've done all your homework. You bought your house. You're in your percentages. You're in all your guidelines. You have it rented, rehabbed. There's a tenant in it. You have a signed lease, and now you're going into the bank on the big day to ask for your money back. So here's the process we'll go through for this. Again, first impression is everything. How many people in here have rentals or have rental houses? Oh man, goodness, half the room at least. If a tenant, let me just ask you this question. Just imagine this in foo-foo land somewhere, la-la land, this might happen. Unicorns exist and this happens. A tenant shows up to you with a 2-folder binder, has 2 years of work history, 3 credit references, a copy of their credit report, a copy of their driver's license, and their last 3 pay stubs, and a deposit check. What do you think about that tenant? That's the way the banks are going to look at you when you go in with this. They're like, oh my God, who are you? They won't even ask you any questions. You'll most likely give that tenant your rental house. You'll probably waive a lot of your own rules for them because they look like they may have just got out of prison yesterday, and that's how they're getting around it. Because if they do it right, nobody will ever check them. It's the same way with you. If you do it this way, the banks are going to ask you much less questions. It's going to be much better. Your documentation package is the key. Right? Imagine that tenant going in with all this documentation. He's going to be treated a lot different than the guy that says, I can't find my driver's license. Give me 3 days and I'll get back to you. Your goal is to give this package to the bank and then do this entire process and never ask you a question. It's possible. I've done it, 30, 40 times now. Here's the goal. So when you first started, ask your loan officer, here, what do you guys need from me, documentation-wise? Okay, if they don't have a list or if they have a vague list, Here's what I take with me every time. I use a 2-pocket folder, just like I imagined a while ago with our tenant. 2-pocket folder. And you're gonna include, these are copies. Don't put your originals in here, this is just a keynote. Don't give them your only copy of whatever you have, because you're gonna leave it with them. You guys understand, you're gonna leave this with the bank, so make sure everything in here is disposable. You're gonna have the last 2 years of all your tax returns. If you have multiple LLCs, companies, personal business, whatever, you're gonna have 2 years of those. And it's gonna be a lot of paper for some people. But again, it's gonna set you apart so far that they may not even look at them closely. I mean, they're gonna look, but they're not gonna go line by line if you look like you know what you're doing. You need to learn how to create and maintain a financial statement. A financial statement, a lot of banks, almost every bank I've worked with, if you ask them for a template, they will give you their template. And all you do is fill in your numbers on it. And most of them are in Excel. You can just type in your bank balances, your assets, your liabilities. Basically, a financial statement shows your current financial status. Here's what I have, here's what I owe, here's the difference. You should have this in there. Now, if you're broke, you're negative on everything, you might want to skip this one, but at least have something positive to say about your finances. Maybe a letter from your landlord saying he's got enough money for next month's rent, something. If you have rental houses, you should include a copy of what's called a rent roll. A rent roll is a list of your current rental houses, their current status, how much they rent for, and basically the terms of that lease. When does that lease renew? You don't have to have a lot of detail, you just need to show houses are not vacant. That's the key point they're looking for on that. If you're employed, and you're going to be using your personal income for this process, you should have your last 3 pay stubs in there, copies of them. Okay, that's on one side where you can divide it up over how it looks good to you. Put cover letters and glamour shot photos, whatever you want in there, just make it look good. Your current credit report is a key part of the whole thing because that's something no one else does. No one does this. They say, yeah, I got good credit and I don't know what's on my report, all that. If you have a copy of your report printed and in the folder, you're gonna be so different than the average applicant that they're gonna remember, you're gonna be talking about you when you leave. Like, did you see that guy coming? They're gonna be, all right, they're gonna do group conference, like, everybody in, huddle in, huddle in. Let me show you what just came in the bank this morning. And you should always include, I'm assuming you're applying for a loan on a particular property. You should include information about this property. You should focus on its value and condition, when it will be finished, what you're doing to it, what the status is as of today. Current lease and management agreement. Your management agreement looks really good because it's normally from a big company of some kind. It's got a lot of, it's like a 10-page management agreement. That always looks good to have in there. Pictures. And I always go to Zillow, and if the value of the house is astronomically high, I print it out and put it in there. So, Zillow says it's worth $200,000. I'm only thinking it's worth $100,000. So see, I'm already conservative. So tax value, you can get tax reports online. Your tax assessor's office, those are good. And generally, not all the time, Realtor.com also started putting values up. Generally, these 3 are going to be in the same ballpark, roughly. Some are low, some are high. Generally, they're going to be roughly in the same ballpark. If you have all 3, you can get an average, like this property is worth about this much money. Okay, so it is exciting, it's fun, it works. I've done it dozens and dozens and dozens of times. I've even started doing this now for my house flips. And when that light bulb went off for me, it started a whole new world for me. Now, I bought a house, one of these is for a house flip. It's, I'll just tell you the address, 79 West Street. I bought it from a wholesaler in town. The day after I bought it, I recorded the deed. I went to the bank and asked for a loan for the amount of money I spent on it. Because the amount of money in its as-is condition is still 80% of its current value. So now I have all my money back. The only thing I have to finance out of this whole flip now is just the rehab cost. And I can go buy another one. So anyway, it's exciting is the point. To me, it's exciting. But there's some huge cautions. You can actually overdo this because the system works so well, and if you go in with this kind of documentation, they're going to be so willing to lend you money, it's actually you can overdo this real fast. So it's happened in my area. I know if you talk to any banks, I ain't gonna name names, but there was a big investor in my town, in my county, that had several hundred rental houses. He had borrowed the maximum on every one of them, and he got to a threshold in occupants in vacancy rates where his vacancies got over 20% or so, and he was so maxed out on loans that the rent coming in didn't cover the mortgage payments anymore, and it was a downward spiral. Now he didn't have money to fix the houses, means he can't ever fill his vacancies, which means there's gonna be more vacancies, which means he has less cash flow coming in, and it spirals downward, and the whole thing collapsed, and he went bankrupt. He was working with all my banks. That's how I know about it. Because I walked in there all smile, giggles, and my 2-ring binder. They were like, well, we just got burned by 50 of these things yesterday, so we need to talk about your numbers. So do not overextend yourself. Borrow the minimum you need to do your next deal with. I can't express this enough. This is the best advice I think you should ever follow in this process. Here's a quote I think you should memorize. When the tide goes out, you discover who's been skinny dipping. Warren Buffett said that. And what he's talking about is the real estate crash. All these people who had these giant rental portfolios, the tide went out, the market turned, the values went down, the rents dropped, and they got caught skinny dipping, and the tide was out. So it's a big, big process. You know, when the tide goes out, we're all going to know if you've been following your own rules or not. You know? And it does happen. You know, it can happen. Here's some questions you should ask yourself when you're doing these numbers, because you're going to be personally liable for a lot of this debt, especially for, you know, until your company is big enough to do it without your personal guarantee. If your rent's in your area, you don't know what's going to happen politically in the world. If the rents drop 30%, can you still afford this place? You know, 30% drop in rents is not unrealistic. You never know when a big company is going to come in and build a 100-unit apartment building right down the road from you with half rent rates that you got. It can happen. So just ask yourself these questions. If you have 10 houses and 5 of them become vacant, can you still afford your mortgage payments on them? For me, the threshold is 50%. I don't allow my mortgage payment to get more than 50% of my rent. It's just, to me, it's just a little too risky. I can handle a 50% vacancy rate across my whole rental portfolio and still pay my mortgages. So this is the safety net we're talking about. We're trying to build long-term, stable retirement income. We're not talking about flips are exciting, quick money, but this is long-term. You're building a retirement portfolio just like any other investment portfolio. You want it to be stable, you want it to be predictable, and you want it to be relatively safe so that when you're 80 years old and you can't hear on the phone anymore, you don't want to have to be talking about, is this thing going to work or not? And if this is your first house, can you handle 3 months of vacancy? If you put it on the market and it doesn't rent for 3 months, can you personally support this mortgage payment for 3 months until this happens? So it can happen very easily. You can have a tenant lose his job. They don't pay you rent this month. Guess what? They're probably not going to pay next month, and then you're going to have to evict or ask them. What I do is I just ask them to move out. 90% of them move out. I say, I'll let you out of your lease if you'll just go. So, 3 month vacancy is just one hiccup in one tenant's life. I mean, it's not unrealistic. Somebody loses their job, they move out the next month, you put it back up for rent again, it takes 30 days to get a new tenant in. There's your 3 months. So it's not unrealistic. Can you cover 3 house payments? Here's what I do. When I would go in and refinance my rental houses, I have a savings account. I just put 6 mortgage payments in that savings account for that house. Now I can handle a 6 month vacancy on that property and not miss a mortgage payment. So there is a limit. You know, I got 6 months to get it rented or sold. You know, after 4 months, if it's still vacant, I'll be putting it out to the wholesale list. You got to come buy it. You know, you can't be stuck holding these things. You got to have reserves. Rentals are unexpected financial popcorn. They just pop up all of a sudden. Like this year, I put in 6 heating and air units. Last year, I put in none. It's just amazing how they come around like that. But you need to have money in reserves for those things. And the banks are going to look for that. Do you have any reserve? Like what happens next week? In the morning, your tenant wakes up and the heating and air doesn't work, and it's a $4,000 repair. do you have that kind of reserve? So I'm just cautioning you, this is a great retirement vehicle. It'll provide for you the rest of your life, but you gotta play a safe game. You don't wanna do the Bible's full of two stories, the good ones and the bad ones. They're like, do this, don't do that, So you don't want your story to be on that page where it says, this guy's really screwed up everything. Here's something, if you can afford to do it, I highly recommend you do not spend any of this cash flow from your rental houses. You accumulate it, and reinvest it. Because again, you're talking about reserves, emergency funds, those kind of things. All the principles that Dave Ramsey teaches apply here. If you can use debt wisely if you manage your numbers correctly. That's the point of the whole thing. I really like separate bank accounts, so you know what your reserves are, and you're not tempted to drop into that. I really like having 4, 5, 6 months worth of mortgage payments in reserve on the whole rental portfolio. Again, this is all just insurance. You're creating your own insurance plan here. And then now, the last step, you got your money back just like I did today. I'm gonna go buy another one next week. We're gonna do it all again. We're gonna start the whole process over again. And I'm doing it for rentals, I'm doing it for flips. Any property that I get a good deal on, you should be able to get a mortgage on it the next day if it's a good enough deal through this process. So, my first year, I only did 2 of these because I had no help, no education, nothing. But the next year, I don't forget the exact number, it's close to 10 the next year. It was so much the next year, that's when the vice president of the bank called me in. Said, Joe, come here. What are you doing? I said, we see you in here, you're doing loan every month. What's going on? And I showed him. I was kind of naive. I just showed him, said, you guys are giving me 100% financing. He was like, whoa. We're doing what? So I killed that guy. I killed that bank. Here's the key. If your package is well presented and you got your act together, there's a great chance they're not going to ask you, how long have you owned this house? How much money do you have in it? And don't lie, they ask you, just tell them. But, I went for years and no one ever asked me that question because it looked so good, the numbers were so right. They didn't even know, the banks didn't even know they were doing 100% financing. Watch your reserves, and when the banks start slowing down and pulling the reins in on you, that's a red flag for you too, saying maybe I am overextended a little bit. Don't rush the process. If you grow as fast as the banks will allow you to, you're probably pretty safe. So I've done it. I've got 20 rental houses. I don't have my exact number, close to 30 flips now. So I've done it probably this process 40 or 50 times over the last 3 or 4 years. And it works. It works over and over and over again. That's it. Finally got to the end. Now we can talk. Any questions? This is my last thing. Any questions before we go?
I have a question about the credit report. I found that which one is the best one for, because they vary in numbers.
They do. What she's talking about, if you guys don't know, there's 3 different credit reporting agencies, and your credit report can be different on all of them. I just picked one. I'm a member of USAA, which is a military thing, and they give me the monitoring, so I just use theirs. And what I find is my score doesn't match what the bank gets on their report, but it's close. So I just use one. I don't really know the difference to tell you the answer to that question. I just use what I have. I just do one. I don't do all 3. I just do one.
When you say 50% of the payment, are you talking about this principal and interest, or is 50% of the bill savings, is that principal and interest, tax and interest, or just the
It's everything. Principal, interest, tax, and insurance is what my goal is. 50%. Sometimes I'll fudge a little bit on that, but I want 50% margins, rent to expenses, because your maintenance and vacancies are going to take up some too. So to me, now again, I use a commercial insurance policy, which is much cheaper than traditional residential policies. But again, your goal is safety. Like, you can't have a high vacancy rate. If that happens, can you cover this? And if you have good reserves, you can go above 50%. So I'm waiting back. Hey, there's my property manager. I hope I didn't. For my personal bank, he's asking amortization, which determines your monthly payment. Amortization is not necessarily when the loan is due, but how much is it divided up for, how many months is it divided over for your monthly payment. So 15 years is what mine are. Mine are all 15 year. Covenant Bank does 20. They won't do anything but 20 year. And then I don't know of any commercial lenders other than Freddie Mae and Fannie Mae that do 30 years. I know there are some, but normally when you hit 30 years, you fall into federal underwriting guidelines. I don't know why that is. Covenant told me they can't go more than 20 without changing all the rules. So 20 years. And so there's a trade-off here. If you do a 30-year loan, your monthly payment is going to be much less than a 15-year note. So your cash flow is going to be higher. You guys understand that process? Lower monthly payment, higher profit per month. But what you don't understand, what you're really missing out on, is on a 15-year note, the amount of your payment that goes to your equity, to your balance, is much higher. So think about this now. I just want to throw out this number for a second. I have 20 rental houses that have 15-year notes on them. And I'm just going to use average. Average across the board, about $300 of my mortgage payment goes toward principal every month. So that means 20 times 3, $6,000 a month going into a tax-free retirement account. Think about that for a minute. If I don't do anything else, if I don't even make a dime off these rental houses, in 15 years I can get $1 million out of it tax-free by just refinancing. There's no taxes on a mortgage, so when that equity pays down, you can refinance it and get that out as a lump sum. So not always, my point, I said all that to say this, the longer term loans aren't always the best deal. You gotta look at, yes, you have higher cash flow, but what is the amount of my payment going into equity each month? Add those together, then you know what you're really making off that.
Interest rates. How are interest rates comparable to conventional?
Well, I have 3 banks that I work with. They're 5, 5.5, and 6.5%. That's my rates I get. So they're 1 or 2% higher than the going mortgage, for Freddie Mae, Mac. I keep getting that messed up. The national rates. So does that answer your question?
Yeah.
So the Covenant Bank is 6.5. They're the highest, but they're also 20-year notes, and they're much easier to work with. So it's a trade-off. They can do a loan in 2 weeks, or sometimes 1 week, when other guys, take months to do.
I just want to add,
Yes, sir.
I've done everything that he says to do, and then I walked into Metro Bank in Asheville, okay? I handed 3 folders with everything he's talking about to a guy named Goolsby, okay? Right.
Is this a good story or bad?
This guy took those folders and he stuck them behind his desk on the ground.
What?
And that's where they sat for 6 months. Okay? I still have one of those properties. I'm still now finally getting financed with Alabama Farm Credit. But reason I say that is because you can have all your ducks in a row, and if you go to the wrong loan officer,
Absolutely.
you're screwed. Okay, because I was at where he was. I was there 1 year ago going, hey, I've spent my 4 conventional loans. Fannie Mae isn't working, the 10 you get with Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae isn't working for me because they put me through hell, and now I gotta go portfolio. So I'm out at local banks looking for a portfolio lender. I find this guy Goolsby at Metro Bank. And I hand him everything. I do everything.
You did it all right.
It's my first guy I handed to, and this is what happened to me. And I've since, after I just walked into the bank, I said, hey, can I have all those folders back? And I left my folders and I left that bank. And I ended up conventional I sold the house to somebody else, one of them, and they financed. I did my last conventional with the other one, and I went to Alabama Farm Credit with the third one, and that loan was just finally approved yesterday.
Wow.
So it took me I wasted a whole year. So when he talks about you gotta know who your loan officer is, and it's gotta be the right guy, I'm the other page where this is what okay, so don't let this happen to you. Just because it's a Metro Bank, just because it's in the county where your house is, just because the guy's a portfolio lender, doesn't mean he's the right guy.
Plus, he just didn't like his hat.
And I didn't wear his hat.
Okay.
I went for the package.
This guy's from
I had
Pittsburgh.
I had the whole package, I had
Yeah.
the suit, I had everything. I even spoke with an Alabama accent while I was there. I wore an Alabama shirt, an Alabama hat, I did everything right.
Absolutely. Sometimes you can do everything right and it still sucks. It just happens. You know, it happens in house flips, it happens in, but I appreciate the
You
story
gotta
though.
have the right guy.
The right guys, everything. And so maybe we can add that as a question to ask during your interview is how long is it taking you currently to close loans? How long, tell me how fast you can do these loans. How many have you done last week, last month? Good question.
Do they have a prepayment penalty, like if you pay your loan off?
No, none of the portfolio loans I've ever experienced have any prepayment penalties. I've never experienced that before. Sure, some do. I've never personally ran into it at all. Bring back, Mr. Book.
I spent 10 years as a banker, so I'll tell you a few things.
Uh-oh.
And maybe share some things here. So are you seeing 5-year balloons, or what are you seeing on what you're doing?
Okay, good question. All right, there's something called a balloon note. A balloon payment is you're gonna pay payments for like 15-year note means you're gonna pay your monthly mortgage payments for 15 years. But the banks put in something there, most of them do. The answer is all of them. They have something called a balloon payment. That means in 5 years, this mortgage has to be either refinanced or paid off. It's a balloon payment. So they want the option to come back and check your finances again in 5 years to make sure you haven't got off track somewhere. Now, I've never had one fail to renew again, but they reserve the right to either adjust your interest rate up if the market's changed or recheck your finances every 5 years.
And so, back to your point, in kind of federal bank, I was involved with one of these, what we call a note.
Mhm.
Guy had 15 properties, and if you're dealing with 4 banks, and they're spread out every year, and your situation changes, those banks are gonna start getting nervous. The one who pulls the trigger first is kind of in control. So the one who pulls the stack of cards out, it crumbles. So, back to your point of trying to keep that loan value and your cash flow at a certain level, it does happen occasionally, and this was 08, 09, so. I mean, that-
So what he's saying is if your finances change and you start looking like a troubled child, these big banks may not be willing to keep doing business with you. And that happens. You got 2 options. You can let them foreclose or you can sell your properties and move on if you can't get it refinanced. But here's the way I do to combat that. I have a strategy to deal with that I'll share with you. This is a free bonus that you can take away tonight. I meet with the banks every year. I meet with all the banks. I call Hayes Parnell, the vice president of Covenant Bank. Just last week, I called him and said, I'd like to meet with you to go over my finances. I took him all of my annual taxes, my tax returns, I said, here's my current status. I just want to keep you up to date because I've got a lot of loans with you guys. So I'm kind of preemptively covering all that so that when my loans come back around in a few years, he knows I come in every year. And now, if I ever get in trouble, I probably won't volunteer that. But for now, as long as I'm looking good, I'm gonna keep showing you, like presentation, right? Anybody have a couple right here?
What company do you get the commercial insurance policy?
I use a company out of Nevada called the Mahoney Group. And it's just somebody I met here at the group. Again, I don't want to get into selling insurance or anything, but it was just they offer it's just for commercial property. That's all they do is commercial property. Hey.
Some banks don't count your rental property income. Is that just big banks or?
I didn't understand your question. Try one more time.
Some banks.
Some banks.
Do not count your
No,
rental
some banks-
as income.
That's right.
They'll put it aside, and then I heard you mention.
Yeah, so generally, the larger the banks, the more rules they have. So, and if you ever go over to this threshold, the Fannie Mae hell threshold, if you ever get into that hell zone over there, they're gonna want 2 years of tax returns showing this rental income before they'll let you count it on for your. But the local banks, they look at your lease, they look at your property management and say it's a pretty steady income. A lot of them will go ahead and include it in the loan approval. So it all depends on the local bank has their own rules. And some of them, some of them you may run into, they say, we want you to have 6 months of this rent history before we give you credit for it. So, but some, the first week they'll give it to you, it just all depends. Yes, sir.
Mention the personal guarantee in securitized loans.
Yes, sir.
Is there a process, can you talk about the process of getting the personal guarantee?
Yeah, so in the beginning, especially, I'm still at this point, I still personally guarantee all of my loans. And again, I really, even if my company went bankrupt, I still feel personally liable for these loans. These people trusted me with their money, so I don't mind personally guaranteeing the loans. But there is a point where your corporation, your LLC, your entity has enough credit history under its name and federal ID number and under its credit. The answer to your question is going to be kind of vague because every bank's got different rules. Some banks will allow you after 2 years of tax returns to do what's called a non-recourse loan, where you're not personally liable for it, it's just based on the property. And again, you're getting into specifics on the bank. You need to talk to your local lender and ask them, at what point can we do what's called non-recourse, where you don't have to sign personally for it? Yes, sir.
Do you have a lot of LLC or just one?
I get this question a lot. He's asking, do you use multiple LLCs or do you just use one LLC? I get this question a lot, and I've been to seminars, I've read books, I've been to classes, I've talked to experts, and everybody you ask has a different answer to this question. So for me personally, my legal defense is good insurance. I got great liability insurance that covers everything that could possibly happen. It's millions and millions of dollars. Sue those guys, leave me out of it. But to answer your question, I use one LLC for rentals. Sometimes if I have a fourplex or something like that in a neighborhood where I think there might be some trouble, I'll put it in a separate LLC just for comfort and safety. But don't fall into the illusion that an LLC or an entity is bulletproof legal protection, because the right, aggressive, talented lawyer can get around almost any of that stuff if they really wanted to. So that's why insurance is a key. Did I answer your question?
Yes. When you show your financial paper to bank, you have, some people might have 10, 20 LLCs. Is it all count for the same loan process?
Oh, yes. So like if you have multiple companies and you have a little bit of income in a lot of companies, the local lenders will put all that together for me to have anyway. I'm saying they do. I'm saying they will, but I'm just saying they did for me. So I had, a few years ago, 5 years ago, I had a software development company where I was writing software, and they included that income with my rentals. They put it all together under one name, which is kind of the benefit of maybe doing a personal guarantee. So, all right, we're about to wrap up. Any more? One or two more? Any more questions?
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
How long is necessary? Do I need to season the tenant? I mainly just having that person in the house with rent roll showing before I ask for a refi. If necessary.
So what he's asking is, there's a term, the banking term called seasoning. Seasoning means it's the time that you've actually owned the property and it's running, it's working. And the answer to your question, you're not gonna like it. Every bank has different rules on that. So, Verna with Covenant, I've worked with her for 4 years now. If I show her a copy of the lease, they'll count it the first month. But other banks, they're gonna want 3 to 6 months. Some banks want a whole year. That's a good question to ask your loan officer when you're asking, is that what is your seasoning? Here's the key word: seasoning requirements. What are your seasoning requirements for rental or to count rental income? I would personally avoid the term seasoning requirements for refinance, because it plants a seed in their head to ask you, how long have you owned this house? So you kind of just want to, don't ask, don't tell, right? They don't ask me how long I've owned it, I don't tell it, we're all happy, everybody's good. Question, any more? Yes, sir.
When you refinance, I know you said they can adjust or not refinance, but a 5-year note comes, so they can adjust the interest rate. Do they kind of nickel and dime on putting a whole new loan together, or they just, how does that work?
Normally, for my loans, it's already spelled out in the loan, it's gonna be a $250 fee to renew the loan. And it's documented in the loan documents that I signed. It's a flat fee, so, I think that's it. We're about out of time, so I'm gonna give.
Do you mind answering a few more?
I'm good. I'm here.
Well, I think we're good on time. I think we had a couple.
I have no idea what time it is, and I like it that way, so.
We're good.
So,
We're good.
I don't know what day it is, I don't know what time it is, and I love it.
Does your management company handle all of your maintenance?
Yes, the management company, up to a certain dollar amount. Again, Chad with Alabama Rental Managers, he's in the back. I give them permission up to, I think, $250 they can do it without calling me, or I don't need to know about it. So, I think last year, 20 rental houses, I made 3 or 4 phone calls the whole year I got out of all that, so.
And then you have crews that go in when you have turnover that kind of just clean up the property?
Yeah, they clean it up, they patch it, paint it, get it ready, rekey it, do locks, and they send me a check when the new tenant shows up. So, I love life, it's awesome. It's worth it, it's so worth it, I just can't express. If you haven't lived a month without knowing what day it is, you gotta have to try that. Like, why are all these people on the lake today? And my cousin's like, well, it's Saturday. I'm like, oh my God, we gotta go home. I had no idea it was Saturday. Next, yes, sir.
I think you might have answered this just a second ago.
Yes,
but
sir.
Can you roll that, your management fee inside that 50%? It's threshold that you try to.
No, that's just debt and tax and insurance, but the
Okay.
10% or 10%, whatever you got on your manager fee, I do pay that out of the profit. But here's my experience personally, is when I turn over my properties to a professional management company, they get 15 to 20% higher rents than I got. I couldn't believe, there were houses I was renting for $1,000, they're renting for $1,200. I was like, man, awesome. I got a pay raise and did less for it. So yeah, I do pay that just out of that, the extra. Because that's something you can't drop if you have to. You can, if times got tough, you could take over management. Any more? Brian, we're good?
Can you guys give Joe a hand?